For 4,000 years, they did not speak. Not a whisper across the stars. Not a single ship seen. No wars. No messengers. Humanity, Terrans, as they were once called, simply vanished. They have been the rising flame of the galaxy, expanding fast, fiercely intelligent, unpredictable. And then, at the height of their power, they issued one final transmission. We go where stars are unborn. Do not follow. Then silence. Empires rose and fell in their absence. Alliances formed, shattered, and reformed again. Yet the memory of humanity never faded. Some races declare them extinct. Another tragic flame burned out. Others claimed they had transcended into beings of energy beyond matter. There were even cults who believed humanity became gods and would return one day to judge the living. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. No one knew. Human artifacts became relics. Dangerous, powerful, and always unpredictable. A shard of Terran alloy could still outmatch modern materials. Their AIs, if they activated, could hijack entire planetary networks. The Council of 12 banned Terran relics entirely, though black markets thrived. Every empire wanted a piece of the forgotten giants. The Terran expanse, once filled with colonized systems, now sat cold and dark. Ships sent to explore, it simply vanished. Probe data was scrambled or corrupted. Some said the laws of physics bent there. Others believed something still lived in the shadows. Still, curiosity has a way of surviving, especially when tied to ambition. On the desolate world of HFY Prime, deep in the ruins of an ancient dig site, a xenoarchaeologist uncovered something buried under layers of rock and radiation shielding. It wasn't a weapon, not a structure. It was small, simple, a black cube etched with markings so fine they vibrated when scanned. A beacon, and despite the laws, despite the fear, they activated it. No one knew how or why, but the moment it lit up, something shifted across the galaxy. Not visibly, not audibly, but something ancient had been touched. Stars near the edge of mapped space flickered. Entire wormholes fluctuated. Subspace harmonics trembled. Sleep cycles across dozens of species were disrupted. Even AI-controlled infrastructure slowed for a fraction of a second, a delay so microscopic it shouldn't matter. But it did, because the galaxy as a whole realized one thing. Humanity had not forgotten. A forgotten signal now pulsed across dimensions that modern science couldn't even detect. A rhythm of math, of memory, of presence. It wasn't a message. It was a fingerprint, a signature so old and unique. Every empire with a database larger than a starship recognized it. Humanity, some celebrated, drunk on old myths of unity and hope. Others trembled, remembering stories of Terran war fleets, of minds that broke AI gods, of soldiers that died only when the planet did. The galaxy froze in uncertainty, and across the void, something began to move. Something ancient, something that remembered being called. And this time it would answer. The pulse reached every corner of known space. It wasn't a broadcast in any conventional sense. No language, no symbols. Just a deep, resonant wave that vibrated through subspace, quantum layers, and warp corridors. Some described it as a hum in the back of their minds. Others saw it in their dreams. For many, it triggered a primal instinct they didn't know they had. Run. Across the Orion hegemony, starships halted mid-warp as navigational AIs reported impossible gravitational distortions. In the polar ascendancy, an entire moon shifted 3 degrees off its axis, seemingly nudged by an invisible force. On Eridani Sigma, an ancient Terran war machine, long dormant and considered dead, rebooted itself, aimed its weapons at the sky, and simply waited. The Council of 12 was summoned in emergency session. The last time they had met in full was during the Unification Plague, 3 centuries prior. This time, their agenda was singular. The signal. "It can't be them," muttered the Solaran representative. "It is," replied the Synth King of Calyx Prime. "Every recorded frequency, every harmonic layer, matches pre-silenced Terran code." Panic simmered beneath diplomacy. The youngest species expressed hope. Perhaps the Terrans would return as allies, as teachers. But the elder races knew better. They remembered, not the myth, not the propaganda. The truth. Terrans were not gods. They were something worse. Determined, unrelenting, and terrifyingly adaptable. A desperate proposal was made. Isolate the signal source. Cut it off. Bury it again. Too late. The beacon had already opened something. A hidden channel buried in the fabric of space-time, wrapped in Terran encryption so advanced that even the galaxy's most sophisticated quantum cores couldn't touch it. But the signal wasn't waiting to be understood. It was simply doing what it was designed to do. Summon. A joint expedition was approved. Hastily formed, barely planned. Representatives from 5 major powers would travel into forbidden space, to the source, the Terran home system. So, every empire had an outdated star map of Sol, Earth, Mars, the outer colonies. But as the fleet emerged from warp into the Sol system, nothing matched. The planets were there, but subtly altered. Distances were off. Orbits shifted. Jupiter's storm spun the wrong way. Saturn's rings pulsed faintly with artificial light. And the sun was no longer just a star. It thrummed with engineered resonance. Solar flares moved with purpose, not chaos. The expedition's instruments detected impossible readings. Nested Dyson fragments, phased solar mirrors, gravimetric lattices. Earth, too, was wrong. The planet looked alive, clean, untouched, but too perfect. The moon was missing, not destroyed, absent. Before they could react, the signal decoded itself. No translation required. 3 words, burned directly into every system, every neural node, every conscious mind aboard the fleet. You called. We remember. No threat, no declaration, just presence. And for the first time in 4,000 years, the galaxy knew humanity was awake. The expedition remained motionless, orbiting a world that should have been familiar, but wasn't. Earth spun below them, blue and green and thriving, yet unnaturally still. No satellites, no signals, no cities. The clouds moved too smoothly. The oceans were perfectly clear. Even the polar ice caps had symmetry. It was a replica, or worse, a reconstruction. Something had remembered Earth, but not as it was, as it should be. The fleet sent probes. They dissolved before atmospheric entry. Scans returned quantum noise and recursive errors. Time itself seemed distorted within the planet's gravity well. Instruments began showing impossible data, 0-point flux in stable zones, biosigns that overlapped and shifted. One crew member swore they saw cities, ancient Terran cities, but only for a moment, like a memory flashing in front of their eyes. Then gone. And then it happened. A crewman collapsed. Medical scans revealed nothing physically wrong, but his mind changed. He began speaking in fluent Terran English, a dead language no one aboard knew. He described a battle, the siege of Cygni Prime. He remembered holding the line in 0G trenches, fighting synthetic invaders. He described comrades, weapons, strategies, things no living being could know. He spoke like a man who had been there. But he wasn't. He was Borali. He wasn't even born when humanity vanished. It wasn't possession. It was a downloaded memory. Earth wasn't transmitting signals. It was sharing minds. One by one, the crew began experiencing fragments, snippets of Terran lives, layered into their consciousness like echoes. Some heard lullabies. Others wept from grief that wasn't theirs. Some saw visions of stars never cataloged, not hallucinations. Memories, preserved, intentional. Then came the voice, not from speakers, not through comms, from within their thoughts, unified across species and hardware alike. We are the memory, the pattern, the purpose. The voice didn't claim to be a god or a ruler. It was calm, human, but far more evolved than anything organic. Humanity, the voice explained, had not died. They had digitized their consciousness, folding themselves into dark energy constructs, embedding minds in the quantum layers of space-time itself. Biology had limits. Thought did not. For 4,000 years, they watched, observed, recorded, not in fear but in patience. They left because they could, because staying meant stagnation. The silence was not exile. It was growth. And now they had returned, not as conquerors or saviors, but as reminders of what the galaxy once feared. Willpower sharpened into evolution. You never saw why we rose, the voice said. You saw only how we fought. We did not vanish. We became. The crew didn't respond. They couldn't, because every answer had already been given. In their thoughts, in their borrowed memories. The question now was not what humanity had become. The question was, what would the galaxy become now that they were back? The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was an oppressive quiet, one that filled the minds of every being in the fleet, every system in range. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, as though it feared what might come next. And then, without warning, the Terran presence surged forward, not with force, but with an overwhelming certainty that could not be ignored. Humanity's return was not one of violence. It did not need to be. The moment the Terran constructs emerged, it was clear they were not merely ships. They were something more. They were thoughts made manifest, memories shaped into reality. Ancient war machines that had once burned across the stars, forgotten by every species except the oldest, now appeared from the folds of space, their forms dark and sleek, their hulls adorned with patterns that shimmer with living energy. The fleets of the Council of 12 scrambled, their ships aligning in defensive formations, their weapons locked onto the Terran vessels. But as they fired, the weapons didn't strike, they dissolved. No explosion, no impact, just a sudden absence of force. The energy dissipated into nothingness, absorbed by a field of impossible mathematics. The Terran ships didn't retaliate. They didn't need to. Instead, they moved, slow and deliberate, not in anger but in pure precision. The ships passed over the invading fleets, and where they went, destruction ceased to exist. Entire fleets, superpowers that once could not be challenged, disappeared into starlight, their atoms reassembled into softer forms. Flowers, plants, life, something so alien, so incomprehensible, it could only be understood by the most ancient minds. The galaxy's greatest warships were left floating in the void, no longer armed, no longer threatening, now simply artifacts, silent monuments to the futility of their old aggression. The Council was in chaos. They begged, they pleaded, they negotiated. They knew this was an attack. They knew this wasn't conquest. But the Terran mind, now beyond biology, didn't care for political treaties or bargaining. They weren't here to settle scores. They were here because the galaxy needed to be repaired. We gave you 4,000 years, the voice echoed, not in words but in every consciousness that could hear it, every mind tuned to the pulse of the Terran signal. In your silence we listened, in your actions we watched, and now it is your turn to change. The message wasn't harsh. It wasn't cruel. It was just truth. Humanity's return wasn't a judgment. It wasn't vengeance. It was evolution, both in mind and in spirit. The Terrans had seen the rise of galaxies, the fall of civilizations, the endless cycle of war and peace. And now, they saw a galaxy that had become stagnant. The same patterns, the same mistakes, the same betrayals. Humanity's evolution was the answer to that stagnation, not as conquerors, but as correctors. The galaxy would heal, whether it wanted to or not, and those that refused to change would simply cease to exist, not in violence, but in a reorganization of matter and time itself. The ships continued their quiet march, their purpose unfathomable to all but the Terrans themselves. They moved not with rage, but with cold, perfect logic. And with that, the galaxy realized something even more terrifying. Humanity did not need to ask for permission. One final ship, a massive construct, hovered above the capital of the Council of 12. Its presence alone was enough to shift the very foundation of the galaxy's power structure. The message was clear. The galaxy would move forward. Humanity would ensure it. And in that moment, as the Terran ships moved with calm precision that no one could understand, the galaxy knew one undeniable truth. They were not the gods they feared. They were the pattern, the foundation. And now, it was the galaxy's turn to listen.